Today we'll talk about the demand for animal products. The topics that we'll cover will be the underlying economic principles that govern food demand and how we purchase food. We'll look at trends in the US as well as global trends. And lastly, we'll look at what's happening to the global trends in the urban population and their demand for various food products. A measure of food product demand that we like to look at is what's called income elasticity of demand. It's defined as the percentage change of a quantity purchased divided by the percentage change in income. So as your income increases by an increment, what proportional things do you buy? In the supermarkets, we have a lot of selection of foods. When your income increases, do you buy meat? Do you buy vegetables and fruits? Or do you buy cereal? Or do you buy oils and fats? And lastly, do you consider dairy products as part of your menu? And so what we'd like to do is to look at how people buy different items as their income changes. Now, when we look at this ratio metric, we can interpret it. When values are greater than 1, these are called superior goods. In other words, as my income increases and I buy chocolate or I buy tobacco, it's considered a superior good. Normal goods have a range in value of 0 to 1. And in fact, ratios that are less than 0 or negative are considered to be inferior. In other words, as my income increases, I buy less of these feedstuffs. Now, there are two underlying principles that govern how we approach our food purchases. One is called Engel's Law and Bennett's Law. Engel's Law states, as income increases, people spend a smaller proportion of their total income on food. Bennett's Law states that as income increases, less is spent on starchy staples and cereals, and therefore more will go to your meat counter. So let's look at these laws over the entire history of the entire globe of all the countries. This is data that looks at food income elasticities across the world. Each country is represented on the x-axis. On the y-axis is this food income elasticity. And we see it for the various food commodity groups. So dairy and meat are in red. We have the lower values in oils and cereals in the light blues. And what we see is that here all the countries are organized in terms of their increasing incomes. And we see that as increases in income occur, Engel's Law comes into play in that food needs are already satisfied, so we spend less and less on foods. We can also see Bennett's Law here by the ordinality of these incomes, elasticities. So we see that there's a preferential treatment. In other words, we like dairy first, then meat, then fish, then fruits, and then cereal. And in fact, at very high levels of income, cereals even have negative values. In other words, we buy less of them. So this charts out what the demand will look like as incomes change and what people desire in terms of their daily food needs. Now, if we look at specific spending habits here in the US, we can see the same principle apply, Engel's Law, that as income increases from left to right, that yes, people spend more money on food, but as a proportion of their total income, it's less. We can see when we look at globally countries, their consumption of poultry products. Here you can see down in the lower left corner where we have very low incomes, there's very little purchasing of chicken kilograms per year per person. And yet as we increase to Saudi Arabia's level of income, we see dramatic increases in kilograms purchased per capita. So again, we see that purchasing of animal products is tightly linked to what the person's income is. If we look at per capita consumption of livestock and poultry over time in the US from 1965, we see that we peaked in 1975 in terms of total meat production, and then there's been a gradual decrease over time. In the 1990s, early 1990s, chicken consumption and purchases exceeded those of beef per person. We see that pork has been relatively flat, around 50 pounds per person per year, and turkey is down there around 18 to 20 pounds per person per year. These trends are likely to continue into the future. If we look at global meat consumption in terms of kilograms per year, per person per year, we see that the world ranges from 20 to an expected value above 40 kilograms per person by the year 2030. If we look at where this is occurring, we see that the developing countries, the Near East, as well as sub-Saharan Africa, are seeing slight increases in terms of the kilograms per person per year, but of course their vast populations are really putting big demands on total animal production systems. We can see that these numbers, again, pale compared to what we see in the industrialized world in terms of our current consumption as well as our future expected. We can also look at the dairy situation in terms of milk consumption in terms of kilograms per year. We see that on a per person basis, the range is about 70 to a little bit under 100 kilograms per person. We'll see a modest increase over time, but again, the large population centers in these areas of the world are going to make that a huge demand on the dairy industries. And we can see that it's distributed across the developing world as well. Again, when we look at the industrialized world, we see that we have vastly higher levels of consumption of dairy products compared to the rest of the world. Now when we say dairy products, this is including cheese, all the side products, not just fluid consumption of milk. The other interesting phenomena that we observe is that as people move into the city environment, okay, become part of the urban population, their demand for milk products goes up dramatically. This is data from China where they looked at the consumption in the rural areas versus urban over time, and we see a dramatic increase as people moved into the urban setting. Part of this might be that people have better jobs and have more affluence, and so therefore can buy more animal proteins. But this is a real phenomena that we see not only in China, but around the world. If we look at the meat consumption in China as well, we can see that there is a vast difference between urban and rural China. With higher consumptions in the urban settings, again reflecting the emerging affluence of people living in the city relative to those remaining in the rural communities. The other interesting phenomena that's happening is we are spending more and more of our money in food purchases away from home. This is US data looking at our purchase habits over time, and we can see that the away home expenditures now exceed those of the home expenditures. A lot of this has to do with the emergence of the fast food industries, and those will continue as people desire to have food on a timely basis. We'll see more and more purchases outside the home. And when people purchase food products outside the home, they tend to consume more animal products, more dairy products. And so this changing food pattern will also put pressing needs on our animal production systems. In summary, as income increases, people spend proportionally less on food. As income increases, people prefer dairy and meat over other products. Urban populations will tend to increase in consumption of dairy and meat products. And in the US, expenditures of food away from home are going to continue to exceed those of purchases for the home. And we feel that these trends will also emerge in the global setting as well.